Today we're going to talk some car audio history. That's right. How does a 160 watt amp relate to a 50 watt amp relate to a 1 watt amp? Let's find out. If you've paid attention in car audio, most likely you've heard of a cheater amp. But have you heard of a liar amp? Well, let's talk about both and what they mean. First up, let's talk about the cheater amp. A cheater amp is a car audio amplifier, particularly from the 1990s, that was rated properly at its standard 4 ohm rating, but was capable of producing significantly more power at low impedance loads such as 1 ohm or half an ohm. This allowed competitors to enter lower wattage classes based on the low official 4 ohm rating, while achieving a much higher power output in reality, giving them an edge in competitions that were based on these ratings. Conversely, a liar amplifier is a car audio amplifier, particularly from the 90s, that was drastically overrated at its power ratings and rated based on max power output. These made-up numbers were designed to trick the consumer into buying based on the advertised false claims at discounted prices and were typically available at pop-up shops and flea markets. Side note, some are still available at Amazon.com. Now, before we get into the 1 watt amplifier, let's go back to 1984 and the inception of Orion Car Audio. Orion was a spinoff of Precision Power and at the time had huge competition from the likes of Rockford Fosgate and MTX, among others. Their first line of amps, the GX series, included the 240 and 280 GX. These models were designed to compete with the Rockford Fosgate Punch 45 and 150 models. However, it wasn't long until a decision was made to create a bright red anodized version of the 280GX and call it the 225 HCCA. At this time, it stood for High Current Class A. This amp also cheated in its power output in a method we'll discuss shortly. The 280GX retailed for $439 and was a solid choice, but there was a problem. Since it was rated 80 watts by 2, it didn't line up with the competition classes at the time, which were typically 0 to 50, 51 to 100, 101 to 250, 251 to 500, and 501 and up at 4 ohm ratings. The red 225 HCCA, introduced in 1985, selling as a 1986 model, retailed for $30 more at $469 and was an amazing hit, selling 10x the number of 280GX models. It had the transformer windings modified to drop rail voltage and put out 25 watts by 2 at 4 ohms, 12 volts, which allowed it in the 0 to 50 watt class, or 2 in the 51 to 100 watt class. However, it was its unique, at the time, design to handle half an ohm stereo or 1 ohm mono loads and claiming up to 400 watts total output power. This provided the 50 watt amp an advantage in the lower wattage categories by essentially cheating the system. 225 HCCA's closest competitor during this time was the Rockford Fosgate Punch 45, rated 45 watts total into 4 ohms and costing less than half of the HCCA. Punch 45 was out-muscled by the bigger, more costly, bright red 225 HCCA. Still an amazing amplifier at the time, but those who wanted more power for the SPL portion of the competition classes would benefit from the HCCA's increased power output. Now, anyone who's watched this channel before knows that ratings don't mean anything. We have to test them to see what the actual output is. Well, luckily, we've tested both the Punch 45 first gen and the Orion HCCA first gen. As you can see here, the Punch 45 is around 100 watts, maybe 110 watts into 4 ohms bridged. However, the 225 HCCA does that at 4 ohms, but also goes to 2 ohms and down to 1 ohm and does about 270 watts total. And although it's not the 400 watts they promised, it is nearly triple the amount of the Rockford Fosgate Punch 45 HD. And for those who are curious and haven't seen it, check out this modified 225 HCCA done by Sean King. I have a full video about that and compare it to the stock model. Very impressive what he did. Soon the 90s were upon car audio, and what a time to be in the genre. Cars had horrible stock systems, so everyone was upgrading and building competition systems with ultra-clean installs, which was all the rage. Orion continued to remain a top choice of many installers and competitors at the time, but you know how it goes. Other manufacturers were noticing the benefits of cheating and began to introduce their own models.
A few moments later.
ProMOS, MTA, Power Series, Reference Class A, XS, Competition, HC, MPS, Nearly all the manufacturers released their own cheater models to compete against HCCA amps. Interestingly, only a few select models included the half-ohm stability claim, as most were designed for only 2 ohms mono or 1 ohm stereo loads at the lowest. Now that brings us to the next line of amplifiers, which I call the ultra cheater amps. For example, US Amps and their VLX series. That's right, they had a model called the VLX 25, which this amplifier was only rated 12.5 watts per channel at 4 ohms. Now, any big dummy looking at the guts here, you don't have to know anything about amplifiers, and you know that this is more than a 25 watt amplifier. And of course, we had to put it on the bench and try it out with the amp dyno, and we showed exactly how much power it put out. Now, these are bridge numbers, but 4 ohms is rated 50 watts. It did over 200. 2 ohms, it did over 350. 1 ohm, it did over 550. And then 0.67, we got over 660 watts into clipping from a 25 watt amp. Around 1996, Soundstream introduced the Class A 10.0 beautiful amplifier we've shown before. And yes, this one is rated 25 watts per channel at 4 ohms, but up to 1,000 watts bridged at 1 or 1/2 ohm mono. And I have shown this one before on my channel. I will leave a link below. I've actually shown the 10.0 and the 10.2, but let's go ahead and recap here and show you 1 ohm bridge. Check this out. This is certified to 1% distortion, 1,155 watts at 14 volts. This amp killed it for a 50 watt amp. It is insanely underrated and what I call an ultra cheater. They even took it a step further with a Class A 5.2 and rated it 0.25 watts per channel at 4 ohms. Now, Ryan, the one who started it all, said, hey, it's enough. So let's talk about the 1 watt amp. Sparking a great deal of controversy during the recent USAC World Finals, Orion presented their new 1 watt amplifier, and several top competitors put it to use. Dubbed this the Concept 97.3, this amp is rated at 1 watt. But looks to put out a great deal more power. Recently, we had a chance to sit down with Orion's new marketing guy, Tim Kelly, for a little Q&A regarding this situation. First of all, Tim, what is the Concept 97.3 amp all about? The Concept 97.3 is an amplifier that Orion built specifically for SPL contest or DB drag racing. In this day of manufacturers trying to build amps for multiple applications, why would you put a specialty amp just for that? As it turns out, we actually built it to make a statement. Way back when, Orion came out with the original cheater amp, the 225 HCCA. That amplifier set the standard for what an ultra-low impedance amp should be. Swell, but what does that have to do with the Concept 97.3 amp? Sit down and listen, I'll be explaining it to you. This summer, when we were preparing for the upcoming USAC and IASCA finals, we had some of our Team Extreme members calling us to say other manufacturers were building some huge amps and rating them at ridiculously low power. The worst part was they wanted our guys to switch, and they were considering it based on they could compete in a lower power class. Thanks, Tim. Let's get back to that 97.3 here and take a closer look. Here on one end of the amplifier, we see the DIN input. That's right, just a 5-pin phantom power output. This is for connecting up other Orion devices that were available at the time. Also, we have the standard RCA inputs left and right. Those are non-Tiffany style. Also, we have a red power LED as well as 2 peak LEDs for the channels. The input gain is variable between 150 millivolt and 5 volts. Also, we have an equalization button for plus 15 dB at 40 Hz, minus 4 dB at 200 Hz, plus 6 dB at 10 kilohertz. So the V pattern for the win. Also, we have the mono button, which sums the left and right inputs. Do note, you do not need to push the mono button to bridge the amplifier. It is internally bridgeable. Here flying on the top, you see the raw aluminum finish, which is clear coated. And on the opposite side, we see just a few more options here. First off, on the far left, our favorite, the DIN connector. That's right, this is a 9-pin square DIN connector, but only 5 of the pins are utilized, which is the left and right positive and negative, as well as the remote turn on. So these, again, are my least favorite thing about the amps from the 90s. I can't stand these, but it is what it is, and it's what was available at the time. Also, we have 4 gauge for power and ground inputs, which you have to tighten through the bottom of the amp. Now, as far as dimensions, 23 inches for the length, 8 inches for the width, 3.1 inches for the height. Millimeter equivalents are there as well. Concept 97.3 used the same heatsink as the 2100 HCCA and the XTR 2250, but this amp was designed to be dealer only and was not available to the consumer. And check out these ratings. That's right, 4 ohms, half a watt per channel, down to 512 watts at 1/256 of an ohm, or 1024 watts at 1/128 of an ohm.
If they're just plain out lying to you.
Check out this demo van from Jack Callie from back in the day. This is a Chevrolet Astro van with all the beautiful concept amps in the back. But you know what we got to do? We got to find out what this amplifier really does. We can't believe these ratings they provide. So let's check out the power output in watts on the left, the ohm load in the middle, the voltage of the dyno on the right. We'll also have the clamp so that we can estimate the efficiency only in the mono modes. Blame a big dummy. Let's move on to the 2-channel test first. That's right, we're going to try 4 ohms. It is rated half a watt per channel at 12 volts. Here we go. We're going to use 1 kilohertz track. We're going to give it around 14.4 volts. You can see we get a lot more than half a watt. We get 260 watts per channel, 14.34. And yes, I do have both channels loaded. I'm only showing you one so you guys won't complain about the dyno being off on one of the channels. Uncertified up to clipping takes us to the clipping point again using the 1 kilohertz track. 263, 14.32. So quite a bit more than the half watt that it's rated. Dynamically sends a pulse tone 1 kilohertz into the amp. This simulates the IHF 202 test. And there you go, 277, 14.59 volts. Again, 4 ohm stereos, that's per channel, and pretty good power. Now next up we're going to try 2 ohms. It is rated 1 watt by 2. And we know, based on the previous test, it's going to do a lot more than that. 1 kilohertz track, certified to 1% distortion, and we get 415 watts per channel at 2 ohms, to 1% distortion, 14.2 volts. Let's try uncertified. Again, up to the clipping point, we should get more than 415. What do we get? It is 423, 14.2. Again, this is times 2, my friends. That's each channel. Pretty good. Dynamic power. It's in a pulse track. Can we get 500? No. But we get 454. That's right, like an old school Chevy engine at 14.46 volts. Next up, we're going to bridge the amplifier by using the orange wire and the black yellow wire. That will give us a bridge. 4 ohms here. It's rated 2 watts at 12 volts. Certified to 1% distortion using the 1 kilohertz track. What can we get? 764 at 14 volts. It is interesting to note, we will link below the XTR 2250 we tested. We actually got over 900 watts, I think, total. This amp was fully recapped and redone on the inside, so not quite as powerful as the one we've tested before. But here we go, uncertified up to clipping right at 800 watts, 799 at 14 volts. It's a little shy of that 1000 watts it's rated, but yeah, we kind of expect that. Sorry, Ryan. Dynamic sends a dynamic pulse tone into the amp. We still can't get the 1000 watts, but it keeps counting up like it wants to. 919, 920, 921, 14.32. Here are all the results of the test that we did. And no, we did not test it down to 1/128th of an ohm because this amp is not designed for that. It is a high voltage amp, not a high current amp. And there are all the results. Again, you can stick around to the very end of the video. I will show 2 ohm test if you want to see that. I'm sure you do. For now, we're going to check the internals of this amp. And again, this one has been recapped and is clean. Looks brand new. You see all these Nichicon capacitors here on the bottom. And yes, this is a XTR 2250 by Orion, just in a different heat sink called a special edition. Designed to cheat the system because Orion started the game. They said we're going to end the game. And this led to the competition classes being changed from 4 ohm advertised ratings to clamp power ratings. So it actually did make it more of a fair system across the board until people figured out how to cheat the clamp as well. But you know how that goes. People are always going to look for a way around a system. But anyway, this was just an educational video for you guys to understand why the 1 watt amplifier was created back in 1997 by Orion and the story of the HCCA and all that fun stuff. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you smash me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you like my content, and leave me a comment below to let me know what you think about the 1-watt amplifier. Now, those who stuck around to the end know that we're going to do the 2 ohm mono test here. We'll try it out at 1 kilohertz with a dynamic burst, see how much power we get. Fire it up, Big D, shoot that 1 kilohertz track into the amp, and there you go. We busted 1,000 watts easily. We're busting almost 1,200. What are we going to get? Where's it going to stop? Is it going to make 1,200? Yes, it does. 1,211 watts, 14.4 volts, Big D out of here.